It happened again last month. 3 people dead in a murder-suicide in the mall in Columbia and Maryland. Virginia Tech, Columbine, Newtown, Aurora. The list goes on and on. Horrific violence and death involving guns. These stories made national news. But what about the day-to-day violence in our neighborhoods? Gun violence, bullying, abuse. We live in a culture that accepts violence as a way of life. But there is one group that says no more. Up next on Another View, we'll talk with members of Black Women for Positive Change, women determined to change the culture of violence in America. Find out how you can get involved right after this news from NPR.
Discussing today's topics from an African American perspective, this is Another View.
And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Before we get into our discussion today on stopping the violence, I want to invite you to join me tomorrow afternoon for a discussion about the Loving story. If you remember, Mildred and her husband, she and her husband were unable to get married in the state of Virginia, and there was legislation around that. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. The YWCA of Southampton Roads is hosting a series of clips from that movie and also a conversation where I will be moderating that program. So I invite you to join us. It is tomorrow afternoon from 2 until 4:30 at the ODU Virginia Beach Higher Education Campus. That's at 1881 University Drive in Virginia Beach. So this is a part of the YWCA's mission of eliminating racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. So no matter where you turn in our society, there is some form of violence. Sometimes it's glorified, like in the movies and video games. But those who fall victim to violence will probably disagree with that glorification. Then there are the high-profile acts, such as the recent shooting at Columbia Mall in Maryland. Violence is ingrained in our culture, but there is one group that is determined to change that culture. Black Women for Positive Change says we should, quote, adapt Dr. Martin Luther King's principles of nonviolence to 21st century youth and show them they can resolve conflicts and confrontations without killing each other. Please welcome Dr. Stephanie Myers, Vice President of R.J. Myers Publishing and Consulting Company and co-chair of Black Women for Positive Change, or BW4PC. Dr. Myers, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for the invitation. Glad to be here.
Glad that you were able to make it down from D.C. We really appreciate that. And also joining us is Ms. Ruth Marshall, an executive with the Washington, D.C. contracting firm and a member of BW4PC. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. We really appreciate you being here, Ruth, too. So I'm really, really curious. I saw a photo of Black Women for Positive Change, and it looks like a really robust group. How did you all come together, and why are you taking on violence? Let's start with you, Dr. Myers.
Well, we really started in 2008 when a really talented, wonderful senator decided he was going to run for president. And we started out as Black Women for Obama, and we were very active during the first term. And as when the president was reelected, we transitioned into a more permanent, long-lasting organization, which is Black Women for Positive Change. So we are very dedicated to the projects that we're working on, and that's who we are.
So the whole idea of violence, Ruth, and stopping the violence, I noticed from looking on your website that you are approaching this from many different fronts, as opposed to, so it's video, it's legislation, it's workshops, and so forth. What do you hope to gain when you finish?
Well, actually, there's so many other organizations and entities that are focusing on gun violence. We wanted to show that we were opposed to violence practically of any nature, whether it's suicide, whether it's bullying, being entertained through violence. I think one of the things that we really have to work on in our culture is not to be entertained through violence, through the movies, videos, and video games. What we're trying to do is get people back to respecting, one another's right to exist, live the way they want to live without always resorting to violence. Even if you watch the sitcoms, there's always, they're screaming and yelling. They're trying to degrade or demean one another. I mean, you get a steady TV diet of that, and that's what we're trying to get people, to get, to put in check.
What do you all think? I was thinking about this last night. When we were little kids, okay, you watched cartoons. You watched the Roadrunner, and the anvil would always fall on top of the wolf, and you watched westerns, the shoot 'em up westerns and so forth. But today's media is very, very different than that. Now, and I'm thinking it may have been more pretend, if you will, as opposed to the really reality that we see today. What do you think, Stephanie?
Violence in the media is such an issue we've got to transform, the way that we communicate with our kids. And we, as I indicated earlier, very active in the community activities of all groups, Republicans, Democrats, Independents. This is not a partisan issue. We need the entire community to get involved because one of our goals is to change the culture of violence in America. And we really have to start at home. We're looking at the shows you just mentioned. You can watch primetime television on network or cable these days and count the murders that go on between the hours of 8 o'clock and midnight. And it is shocking. It is shocking. So we're literally spoon-feeding our children with this idea that combat and conflict is somehow okay. We have to modify that. When you introduced us, you said we wanted to apply some of the principles of Dr. King and some of the nonviolence principles that are time-tested. Look at this wonderful man we just lost, Madiba, Nelson Mandela. I mean, a man who spent years, decades in a prison and came out with love and reconciliation for the people who imprisoned him. Now, that's conflict resolution at a high order. So somehow we believe that our young people, black, white, young American youth, and non-American youth, immigrant youth, are the most brilliant, talented, well-educated, trained young people on the planet. We believe they can transform the world when they decide they want to. We believe they can do it through music, through television, through film. They have power. They are transforming the world now. Look at hip-hop. Look at what our kids did with breakdancing right out of the streets of New York City and Baltimore and these communities. So we know when our young people decide that they don't want to have to go visit daddy in prison, mama in prison, brother and cousin, Pookie and Tamika, and when they decide to change the culture, it's going to change. So we're really coaches
to start the to be in the catalyst to get it going. So you paint a picture of young people being in a very positive light, but then you have people like unfortunately Mr. Michael Daun over the weekend in Florida with the Stand Your Ground laws, who felt that he was threatened by African American teens and wound up shooting them, and unfortunately with the verdict they could not come to a decision in terms of whether or not he should be convicted for first-degree murder. The jury seemed to say it was okay because attempted murder of the other teens, but not the one that he killed. Do we have to take it one person at a time, Ruth?
Well, I tell you, I knew this was going to be brought up, and of course, you get very emotional about that because the message it sends to our young people is that their life is not worth anything. I mean, for this gentleman to shoot, I think it was 10 times into the car. There was no gun found in the car. No one threatened his life. I know that it was in Florida. I know it's a stand your ground, but we have to go back to look. If you're going to get out here and make laws where people have, carte blanche where they can kill you, then those laws need to be changed. But the whole thing between then, of course, the simulation with the Zimmerman case, a lot of people didn't even know about the so-called Stand Your Ground law. So it's another instance when, after the Trayvon Martin case, when you found out about it, that we don't know what kind of legislation they're putting in place that ultimately is for not necessarily the good of the average person. That's just another case, another example why we as a community need to get involved at an early age with their young people, to help them navigate around all the pitfalls as far as violence and even the education system.
So one of the things that you promote is for young people to take a pause and say, on the other hand, or a second chance. Talk to me a little bit about that, Dr. Myers.
Well, we decided last year, after looking at all the violence that was going on and the pain that we all felt with the Trayvon case, the little girl, Hadia Pendleton, who came to the inaugural and got killed when she went back in Chicago, and all the things that just happened in the neighborhoods, we decided to have a national summit on nonviolence last August, which we did have at Metropolitan AME Church in Washington, D.C., which is headed by a Norfolk native, Reverend Ronald Braxton. And as a part of that summit, we quickly realized we want young people to be reached with this message. Well, if you're going to reach young people, you got to go where they are. And because they are so technologically oriented, we wanted to do a mechanism and create a product that would be useful through social media. So we decided to produce a short film. These days in the industry, the 15-minute short is becoming extremely popular. Young folks can download it on their cell phones, their PCs, their tablets. So we produced a film called On Second Thought.
On Second Thought, yes.
And the whole idea of On Second Thought really grew out of a true story that occurred in Boston of two little, we call them baby mamas, and a baby daddy, girls pregnant by the same young man who was an aspiring basketball player. And we took that story and recreated it. Fictionalized it a little bit, but basically the story is there. And the story tells a tragic story about one of the young girls becoming very jealous and envious of the other one, due to the fact that the first baby mama had an 8-month-old and wanted child support. And then the second girl is pregnant by the same guy. So you got the love triangle. That goes back to Greek tragedy, right? It's nothing new. So the kids are in the same place we've been at for hundreds of thousands of years. So we produced this film On Second Thought. Now, the reason that we love the phrase on second thought, that comes from our grandmothers and our grandfathers. And all across America, Americans know that concept. Take a second thought. Take a second look. And we'll always say that to a young person now. You need to have a second thought. So this is the message we want to get out to young people, whoever's listening to me. We want you to incorporate the concept of taking a freeze frame. Before you commit violence, before you take that gun, Mr. Dunn, you have a second thought. He desperately needed a second thought before he killed that young man in that car.
As a matter of fact, we have a clip we have two clips actually from the film. And so I want to play the first one. And this is the young lady who is pregnant, the second baby mama, who is pregnant. She's talking to the father of her child, and they are scheming to bring harm to the first young lady. Let's play that clip.
Jamal, what is going on with you? Why haven't you called me back? I've been calling you all weekend.
Niecy, baby, I know. I'm under a lot of pressure right now. Kim is going to court on me. She's jamming me with this child support.
Well, I'm done with Kim. I can't let her do this to us and our baby. Look, my mama got a burner in the drawer. It's loaded. I know how to use it. Let me find Kim. I will end this. And she won't bother us no more. What do you think I'm playing?
Okay, Niecy, this is how we're gonna do this. I'll call Kim and I'll tell her to meet me tomorrow. Then we'll see what you can do. You really got this thing, Niecy?
I'll do anything for you.
Now, in the movie, at the end, there is a rewind of of what happens, and this time she takes a second thought, and she calls her father instead of Jamal.
You need to be considering taking Jamal for child support too.
I know, Daddy. But I want her gone. And she just want him back. But I'm gonna dare her, Daddy, just like you taught me. Not let nobody punk me.
And if you hurt her, you're going to jail. You know I pay child support for you, right?
What?
Yeah, I did. And I still do. It was rough, but you and your sister, y'all are my daughters.
I love you so much, Daddy.
And it's not for you to handle this or, go out and kill anybody. But please promise me you won't do anything stupid. Listen, I love you.
Thank you.
And unfortunately, in the real life situation, the young lady didn't take a second thought and actually wound up committing the crime. I think that, what are young people saying, Ruth, about the film when they see it?
Oh my gosh, they found it very, very powerful, and I think they could see themselves in the character of the young lady saying that she wants to end this with the other woman. It's not like let me go, let me talk to her, let me fight. We want it to be permanent. See, once you take a gun or any other instrument to harm someone else, it's a permanent thing, whether it's permanent disability or whatever. They're looking instant gratification, I guess you call it. They want it done now. But a lot of young people was like, wow, when we did the summit, there was a lot of discussion on that. But it's interesting that they saw the movie from different standpoints. Two young ladies, involved with the same man. A lot of the young women felt, oh, wow, just low self-esteem among, the two young women involved. And then another one said, well, you know what? In the film, it was the father that talked to the daughter and talked her out of it. And she said, you know what? Some of us don't have someone, a parent or an adult, to talk to us like that. Because, when you in your environment and you seeing things one way, a lot of times it's because no one else is talking to you, giving you a different perspective. Mm-hmm. So they really, really, not only, I'm not going to say they enjoyed it, but it hit a nerve. It was just long enough, just 15 minutes. It was just long enough, for them to get it. And then the young man that come in at the end, who's one of the actors, and he gave a real true story about his cousin just being killed like 3 weeks prior to he got this particular part.
Yeah, he was talking about how difficult it was for him to play the role.
Do that because he had an actual real life situation, basically a similar situation, because she was pregnant, 17 years old, and her boyfriend ended up taking her life. So there was just so many dynamics that the kids could just latch on to and get it. And that's what we wanted.
So, Dr. Myers, I've talked to young people a lot, and sometimes when they're in situations in bad neighborhoods and so forth, and they say, you know what, you can't relate. You don't know about this because this is our way of life. How do you respond to that?
Well, that's a really, really tough issue, and we as adults have got to listen to them, and we've got to think of some new ways to protect and rescue them in some instances. We have the film being shown at a juvenile delinquency facility up in Pittsburgh, and some of our members go in fairly regularly, and they're showing it to small sets of the young people at different times. One of the young ladies was asked the question, "Why are you guys so angry? Tell us about the anger and how it is that you end up here." Their answers were fascinating. They said, we're 15 years old. Our moms are using drugs and alcohol. Our dads might be away in prison. We are having to raise our siblings. And in some cases, we're taking care of grandma, who lives with us also. And these young people told us they're actually parenting their parents. And they go to school, maybe mom, steals something, shoplifts from the local supermarket or whatever it is, and she's in the news. They go to school the next day and their friends are teasing them. I saw your mama on the news, saw your brother on the news, saw your daddy on the news, and they have to fight to protect the family reputation. So in order for them to stand up for the family members, they end up getting into conflict with each other, and then they end up at the juvenile delinquency facility. So somehow we've got to figure out how to get more parenting classes. We need churches, schools, civic organizations, political organizations, whoever you are. don't assume that people know how to parent. Don't assume that you're not going to have somebody like a George Zimmerman or a Daun who's quick trigger. They're just as irrational, more irrational than our kids. There's no difference. People want to say, oh, there's something about, in the larger society, their gun use is somehow okay. But in our society, our gun use is it's the same thing. Yeah. Now, I know we're sitting here in the state of Virginia, and we certainly, as Black Women for Positive Change, we support the right of people to defend themselves. We strongly support the need for national security, for America's defense, absolutely. I mean, I've been a presidential appointee myself in the past, and I'm certainly very believing that we must be a strong nation. There's no question about that. And I believe that individuals have the right to self-defense. So, but after you've said that, what Daun did and what Zimmerman did and what goes on in these communities is not self-defense. It's aggressive. My mama's got a burner in her drawer. It's an aggressive kind of thing. Yeah. So we have to really sit down and we have to train adults to not show this role model behavior. When you have somebody like a Daun or a Zimmerman act the way they did, kill a young Black youth, the young boys are watching them. Young boys in Florida.
And the young boys in the community then say, well, then this is the way to handle it.
This is the way to handle it.
And so then you get that one-on-one crime where the young people are killing each other.
This is the culture that we're talking about.
But typically, especially here in this country, a lot of things happen under the blanket of the law. So if they stand your ground, they're sort of blanketed under that law that they can, anytime they feel threatened, whatever that definition might be, that they can do, they can do whatever they want to do. But I want to say something about the film. The good thing about the film, one of the good things, and there's many, is that we didn't focus on definitely the inner city. If you watch the film, this is middle class people, because we wanted to show that the violence is not just inner city, not with just a particular community, as you could tell from Columbine, Sandy Hook, and the others. It's not just one segment of the.
It is a nationwide.
And that's
problem.
why when we did the summit, it was a national summit. We have people all over the country come in from Connecticut, from California. I mean, everywhere, and we also had elected officials who all over the country, tapped in, because it's a national problem. We need to change the culture, our national culture of violence here in this country.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. We want to know, what are you doing in your community to help stop the violence? 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. You wrote a manifesto and published it. Can you talk about that?
Sure. And before I do, I want to just mention that the producers of our film was Harborview Filmworks, a minority-owned film company out of Prince George's County. So I want to make sure that they get a little recognition
and
there.
And actually, also, before you go into the manifesto, tell people where they can see the film. How do they get it?
Oh, yes. You can see the film on YouTube. You can go to www.blackwomenforpositivechange.org.
And you can number 4.
Not for the website.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Black Women FOR for positivechange.org, and you'll see a poster on the website, and you can click to view it, and it is available. But later on in the show, I also want to talk about how institutions can get copies of the DVDs. There's an order form there where you can purchase a DVD for a donation of $10, and we will mail you a copy of it, because we want this to be seen. Now, the other co-chair of Black Women for Positive Change,
who just happens to be on the phone,
is Delegate Daun Hester. Okay, and Delegate Hester is on the phone. That's great. She's a tremendous leader, not only here in the state of Virginia, but all over the nation, and has been just tremendous in all of this. You asked about the manifesto. Okay. As a part of our national summit, we did the film, we did the interfaith outreach that Ruth mentioned, which involves Jews, Arabs, Christians, Hindu. Everybody's under this tent. Black, white, male, female. We decided to issue a manifesto to the nation really, to say that we must change the violent issue. We want to see more gun control legislation in every state in America. We believe that there are people who have mental illnesses who should not be able to gain access to weapons. We want to create new forms of media, which we hope our film is an example of, socially responsible, socially relevant media. And there are a couple of other points, but you said Delegate Hester's on the phone,
Yes.
and I want to give her a chance to talk.
As a matter of fact, if you're just joining us, we're talking about ways to stop the violence in our communities and our culture with members of Black Women for Positive Change, Dr. Stephanie Myers, Ruth Marshall, and joining us by phone is the Honorable Daun Hester. Hi, Daun. How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for stepping out of the legislature and joining us in this conversation. I tell you, your sisters here, though, are handling their business. They're keeping it going.
I knew they would. If I didn't make it, I knew that we would be fine.
So, Daun, can you talk to us a little bit about whatever is going through the legislature this session that has to do with violence or eliminating violence?
Well, of course, we're looking at more legislation, which I'm certain will get out of the House as it relates to individuals who have been diagnosed with a mental illness and their access to weapons, all types of weapons, as a result of some of the things that we have seen across the country, but certainly here in Virginia, making sure that individuals, that there's a database of individuals who do have mental illnesses who may try to purchase weapons, that we'll be able to catch that before they're able to purchase a weapon. So that's probably one of the most critical areas. We're also looking at in domestic violence, making sure that, because we're seeing that as a rise, we're reducing in some areas, but as it relates to individuals and relationships, and violence there, how we can make sure that we take care of the individual who is the victim. And that legislation will help with keeping families together and making sure that women and sometimes men are protected. So those bills are going through the House and Senate as we speak.
So, since you're from right here in Norfolk, Daun, what are some of the things that you see within Hampton Roads that we need to be doing or that you wish would change so that we can really have this conversation about stopping the violence?
Well, we have to acknowledge that it is a true problem, and it's a problem everywhere and among all generations and all races. And in that conversation, we have to be inclusive of individuals who are fearful of their rights to bear arms being taken away versus individuals who get their hands on guns to use them for negative purposes. There are laws in Virginia that, yes, we need to change, but at this juncture, we might have the support in the House to be able to make that happen. And so there is a lot of work and conversation that needs to take place with lawmakers, but in communities directly. I just see that we have to talk more with our young people. When children get their hands on guns, one thing as I've been going through this process with Black Women for Positive Change, as we're looking at how we can change this culture, is that also our children are don't have the opportunity to learn how to understand how powerful that gun is, even though many in our communities have been traumatized by losing someone from gun violence. But to actually then pick up a gun and it be close to you and understand the pain in that, and even the healing that needs to take place, which is another area that we really don't cover very well community-wide. Those are things that we need to look at even more.
There's a question from Facebook. It says, in addition to the summits, does Black Women for Positive Change work with any community groups to reach youth on a daily or weekly basis? I'm going to let you take that first, Ruth.
Well, we have specific groups from a lot of them from our own membership, like we up in Pittsburgh. They've put on some great programs and stuff, to reach out to youth. And again, I think Dr. Myers had mentioned about working with Mercer Hospital in different areas. It's not necessarily on a weekly basis.
Yeah, are there chapters across the country?
We don't have
you
chapters.
Or not?
It's not chapters, but in each city that they're in, then they can recruit and do whatever they need to do on that end. But we really don't have chapters. But we have, especially since our summit, we've worked with a lot of with various different groups. So Dr. Myers probably can expound upon that more. But we do.
Okay,
sure,
Dr.
we're working
Myers.
with the National Action Network, which is headed by Reverend Al Sharpton, the NAACP, Mercy Hospital in Baltimore. Right here in Virginia Beach, Mayor William Sessions issued a proclamation. We had 40 elected officials who issued proclamations for a day of nonviolence, and those included elected Mayor Vincent Gray in Washington, D.C. So we're establishing linkages with city and state officials, governors, Governor Deval Patrick of Massachusetts, members of Congress. And so we're really creating a network, which one of our goals in the spring is to reach out to the elected officials and say, okay, last year you issued a day of nonviolence, August 22nd, 2013. In 2014, we encourage you to have a program in your community, in your district. Play the film on Second Thought. Have a discussion with the young people in your community. So we're really working now on drilling down to get it to a community level. And we invite people on Facebook to go to the website, and there's a place you can sign up and get in contact with us, because we're a virtual network. So our members are all over the country, but we're kind of a committee of the whole. We're all involved in it all the time.
And the website is blackwomenforpositivechange.org. 440. Just 1 second for me, Daun.
Okay.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Give us a call. What would you like to see done in your community to make a change, to stop the violence? 440-2665, 1-800-940-2240. Okay, Daun, go ahead.
I just wanted to add on working with individuals. One of the things we're doing, especially with the film, to get more discussion around the film, is one, showing it to leaders who are working with our youth, and then having them to have conversations and show the film with young people. In March at Booker Washington High School on the 29th, we've had, probably for the past 10 years, I know, a conference is called a FAT conference, and that's
PHAT.
Promoting healthy, active teens. And I will be showing on Second Thought and having a discussion with teens who are interested in coming in to see the film and then to talk about it. So we will be doing that in Norfolk, and I'll be promoting that more once I get out of session and get back home.
Okay.
Great.
But that's a great place where, we have probably about 300 to 400 children that come through in the course of the day.
That's fantastic. So I don't know, how much time do you have with us, Daun? Can you stay a while, or do you need to go?
Yes, I can stay until 1.
Oh, okay, great. Fantastic.
Can I add one little thing?
Yes, you may.
When we did the summit, we ended it by putting together a toolkit. See, we invited leaders from the community, from the church, from legislation. And what we did was, after the summit, we gave them a toolkit. And the toolkit was, of course, a copy of the DVD and other tools they could use when talking to the groups. Because what the purpose was, once you attended the summit, you would go back to your own various community, and then you would take it up from there. So we had outreach from the beginning. And we're following up with the different people around the country who are doing the same things.
And you also have a nonviolence talking points guide on changing the culture of violence in America. And the thing that's so special about this is that there are points from Dr. King, from Mahatma Gandhi, from different religions. I mean, there's Christian verses, there's Muslim, the Quran, there's Jewish. It goes across the board in terms of ways that this conversation can happen.
That's why we're so excited about this group, because we have men who belong to the organization, Black Women for Positive Change. We call them our good brothers. One of our good brothers is Bishop James Curry of the Episcopal Diocese in Connecticut. He is a white male. We have Imam Talib Sharif, who is head of the nation's mosque in Washington, D.C. I mentioned Reverend Ronald Braxton with the AME Church, the Jewish Community Center with Rabbi Batya Steinloff, a woman rabbi, is a member of the group. So we're really transcending, and we have fun teasing the men and the non-African Americans, saying, well, we belong to y'all's groups for a long time, so now it's a chance for you to belong with us. We're all Black women for positive change. So it all kind of works out. But the Nonviolence Talking Points Guide will be available on the website very soon for a donation. We want pastors, preachers, ministers, rabbis, imams to preach from the pulpit about nonviolence, because the moms and the dads are there, grandma and granddad, and we can't pretend it's the kids' problem. When kids are exposed to verbal violence as children, and adults feel that they can scream and holler and whip and be violent with young people, they're teaching them violence. So we've got to find another way to raise children so that they're not so angry and turn around and beat up the ones, that kids say, look, you might have power over me in the house, but when I get to school, I'm going to have power over somebody else on that classroom yard. So we've got to stop it where it starts.
And I was going to bring that up because, when we have conversations about young people today, it always goes back to the parenting. And it's the hardest job on the planet that comes with no manual to tell you how to do it. And so reaching out to the faith community to help. But what other ways can we reach the parents? Ruth?
Well, we're looking at providing safe places, for parents, not just the kids to go to. When you're overstressed, and I guess in our society, since everything, it needs to be done now, from the job to getting the kids off to school and providing. So we're looking for ways that we can talk, reach out to the parents as well as the young people, because really, your learning starts at home for the most part. So we're reaching out in those areas, trying to get parents, to go to some of the other outreach areas that we have. So, we're starting with, we're focusing now more on the parents. And I think our next summit is going to highlight dropouts, which will be talking to the parents, because you can tell when kids feel disconnected to the school system, then they go to other alternatives. And normally it's not in their best interest.
Absolutely. And as you know, or the audience knows, here in Hampton Roads, we are the American Graduate Station for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And we have lots of information about that connection between dropouts and violence. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Bob joins us from Surrey County. Hi, Bob. You're on the air.
Oh, thank you. It's nice to talk with you this afternoon.
Thank you for calling. Go ahead.
As I told your screener, the biggest challenge seems to be really getting at the root causes of violence. And I'm still not sure that I've heard any specific solutions. When you start comparing incidents like Sandy Hook and Columbine, where you had, and also Virginia Tech, where you had individuals with mental issues, to the violence that you saw with Zimmerman, and I think his last name was Daun, the man that's down in Florida. They're not the same. The problem is not, and I guess the one consistent part to it is that there's a presence of a gun, but it's not, I don't think that the gun is the connecting factor. I think there are other issues, and then sitting there and saying, okay, well, they need to take a snapshot. I don't know how that works in scenarios that you've talked about.
Okay, Bob, let's let our guests respond to that, and thank you for calling. Dr. Myers.
Yes, Bob, I appreciate what you're saying. And one of the things that we invite you to do, and others who are interested, we're looking at the triggers of violence in 2014. And mental health is a huge area that we must really gain more knowledge about. Stop denying. Many families have mentally ill challenges right in the household, and they know it. Domestic violence grows out of a lot of mental health issues. So we're going to have positive change forums. We have one coming up February 27th. And if you go on our website, blackwomenforpositivechange.org, In the next day or so, you will see a flyer that will give you the call-in number. And we're actually inviting people to call in to a conference call where 2 experts will be featured. One of them is from Virginia. Josh Horwitz is executive director of the Educational Fund to Stop Gun Violence, and he has written papers on mental health and gun violence. And William Killebrew with the National Association of State Mental Health Program Directors, who was a victim of violence himself at the age of 10 years old, saw his mother and brother murdered in front of him. So he knows firsthand what the real deal is. So yes, there are triggers and causes. We know poverty. We know that emotional instability, mental illness, these are some of the triggers. And we have to get a handle on what the others are. And then we've got to change them. America, and just to kind of finish out here, America's such a great country. We have accomplished culture change many times in this country. The most profound cultural change was going from slavery to freedom for African American people. Women have gone through culture change from out of the house and the kitchen into the corporate boardroom. We have culture change that has occurred in this country. People with disabilities now can get terrific jobs and work from their wheelchair or work from home. We know how to do culture change in this nation. We're one of the few nations on the planet that can set a goal, research it, and produce it. We have legislators like Daun, Hester, and other brilliant people in the legislatures all over the country, so we can do this.
Mm-hmm. And Daun, when you're talking about the mental health piece, I'm sure that was heightened by what happened to Cree Deeds recently with his son.
Exactly.
That is correct.
Yeah.
And, for those of us that knew Cree, we knew what he was working with, but even he did not anticipate what his son would do, even though he had been trying and working with him for such a period of time. And that's, that too is, he knew his son was in crisis because that's why they went to try to get some help. But then, we're going to make sure that what happened to him doesn't happen to any Virginian again, so that they do have somewhere to go and a bed for them, and we're increasing funding to be able to do that. But as as Bob was saying, you do have to dig deeper, and we want to dig deeper. And as a network of people around the country, in our communities, we are working to find those and work on those issues. And so mental health now, as a result of some of the other pieces, are, yes, as you say, bubbling up to the top. So we focus on it. Mental health is the issue. We know with the mass shootings that all of those were mental illness related. Then let's concentrate on those, and what do we have to do? We know that we have many people in jails now who are mentally ill because some have insurance, some don't, but they don't have medication. Some medications work, some don't. The younger you are, the harder it is. Maybe then the older you get, you don't want to take the medicine. So there's just so many things that in the mental illness field that could be worked on that would certainly reduce and help us in changing that culture of violence. But in that culture, too, and just the last thing I'll say about that, is that we have to stop treating it as something to be ashamed of. It's the person that we love, and we have to help them have the best life, so that everybody around can have a good life as well.
A good life. I want to ask you, Dr. Myers, you were talking about the young people in the juvenile home. Did they agree that they could, or could they see themselves taking a second pause, waiting, taking a moment to breathe?
Absolutely. And it had not been presented to them before. And they really, really responded, so much so the juvenile center keeps reaching out saying, come back, come back, come back. The young people had never been treated as people who could think before. See, we have a tendency to take our young people for granted and not recognize their intellect. In America, we have 3-year-olds who can go on the computer. I have grandchildren right here in Norfolk, Virginia, okay, who start the computer at ages of 2 and 3. We have women like Ruth Marshall, who not only trained her own daughter, but took in another child and is now mentoring a 5-year-old, teaching her from the ground up. We have to respect the minds of these children. They are so smart. So yes, when we show the film to them, they get it. They get it. And when we come off of our high horse and stop being so the adult and sit down with the kids and say, look, what's really happening with you? They got a lot going on. And they see and know more than we want to give them credit for. So yes, Bob, there's a lot of issues that have to be touched, but somehow, without telling children that the me generation is perfect, because I think we've gone overboard in making them feel that everything they do is all right. That's not the way to go. But we do have to respect their ability to think. And that's what On Second Thought is all about. It's saying you can think and you can stop and you don't have to shoot in an emotional rage of the moment. That guy Daun, he shot in the emotional rage of his moment. I feel sorry for his wife, because you can be sure anybody that mad has slugged her. You know, that's probably the untold story. You know, domestic violence is always sometimes a component of this.
Close by.
Yes.
Right. We've got about 2 minutes left in this conversation. So, Daun, I want to give you an opportunity first. What is a final thought that you'd like to leave with people in terms of starting to change this culture and become a more nonviolent culture?
I think the main thing is that it's not a final outcome, that we have to continually work to make a difference for all of the people that are around us. And so to Bob and Story, we want to be able to invite him, and I'll go down and meet with him and have a conversation in Surrey. We have to connect with one another, those of us who are interested in this topic, to build that network of people who are willing to help us, help our children, help our adults, learn how to resolve things and think a second time.
Okay, that's the Honorable Daun Hester, delegate for the 89th District. Thank you so much for joining us.
And co-chair
of Black Women for Positive Change. Absolutely. And okay, Ruth, you got like 30 seconds, and we got about a minute left.
In answer to Bob about, a solution, he haven't heard a solution. Like, there's going to be more than one solution. And when we're talking about from Black Women for Positive Change perspective, we're not just talking about gun violence. That's just one sort of violence that we're looking at.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. And you have the very last word, like 10 seconds.
Okay, 10 seconds. America, let's do this. We can show Ukraine, Syria, and the rest of the world how to have a nonviolent culture and coexist and move into the future.
Dr. Stephanie Myers and Ruth Marshall, both with Black Women for Positive Change. The website is blackwomenforpositivechange.org. And we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Daphne Maxwell Reid, and if you'd like to have another insightful conversation about the African American community, join us on Another View, WHRV 89.5.
And thank you, Daphne, for that promo. We appreciate that. Historian, interpreter, teacher. These are just 3 of the words that describe John McCaskill. John spends most of his days working for the National Park Service. He shares his knowledge with visitors who stop by the various memorials in Washington, D.C. Now, when he's not doing that, John uses history as a vehicle to teach young people the principles of leadership and teamwork. He recently stopped by our WHRO studios to share some of his vast knowledge with our Lisa Godley.
History's been my passion since like 8 years old.
And it shows, because whether John McCaskill is dressed in character or giving a tour, he knows history well and can bring it to life. In the short time he was in our studio, he took us from this region's role in the Revolutionary War to the War of 1812, and of course, the war between the states.
Civil War. I mean, my goodness, you've got, the Battle of Hampton Roads. And when that takes place, everybody else's navy in the world becomes obsolete. I mean, you had nations that actually stopped building wooden ships to look at these ironclads. Fire! You've got You've got Fort Monroe. And just outside of there was the great contraband camp. Well, a lot of those individuals ended up becoming soldiers in the Union Army.
John says it's fascinating to him that most people think the Emancipation Proclamation freed all the slaves.
You know, if you were a slave in the border states, January 1st, you were going to still be a slave. If you were a slave anywhere else where the Union was in control, you'd still be a slave. It only affected those slaves that were in areas that were in rebellion to the Union. But there's a small clause in Mr. Lincoln's January 1st version of the Emancipation Proclamation, and it says any black who wants to join the Union Army or the Union Navy will be allowed to do so. Now, prior to that, you could use them as laborers or blacksmith or whatever, but now they have the opportunity to actually fight legally. 180,000 individuals join as black soldiers. The numbers in the Navy, not as many, but and if you account for everybody who participated, you've got over 200,000 people. Well, there are not too many stadiums in the world that can hold 200,000 people. That was a game changer.
When he's not giving tours, John does living history. When he dresses in period attire, which can range from a Union soldier to a Tuskegee Airman.
Hampton University had a CPT program, civilian pilot training program, where they were teaching college students how to fly. And they were doing this all over the country because they knew at some point we were going to need pilots. Hampton sent 2 of their students down to Tuskegee to learn to fly.
One thing he loves about history is that he not only gets to share what he knows with others, but he himself is always learning something new.
I didn't find out until recently that there were African Americans at D-Day on June 6th. All the footage I had seen, everything I had read, nothing. And come to find out, there were just under 2,000 who were there on D-Day.
Another one of his passions, teaching young people to be leaders. He uses icons like Reverend C.T. Vivian, who was beaten while trying to vote, and with blood running down his face said, "We are willing to be beaten for democracy."
Well, I had a school group one day, and we're walking up there, and guess who's sitting on the bench, on the mall? It was Dr. Vivian. And I saw him. I wasn't sure if that was him, and I looked up. I said, "Is that Reverend C.T. Vivian?" And he shook his head. And I'm walking over to him. I got my hand extended. And before I get to him, I drop to one knee, and I just say, "Sir, thank you, thank you, thank you." And I must have thanked him about 20 times. I said, "Sir, you were willing to lay your life down for a generation you hadn't met." And this is what he told me, and I wrote it in my journal. He says, "Yeah, but I knew they were coming." Seeing character, courage, duty, honor, pride, commitment, service, sacrifice, in ordinary people, oh my goodness. And, there are lessons that we can learn. And so when it comes to leadership, when it comes to teamwork, there's so many examples in history.
And John uses those examples, especially when he teaches the leaders of tomorrow. For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
And I just love his enthusiasm. If you'd like to know more about John, you can visit his Facebook page at John W. McCaskill History Live. We hope today's program gave you food for thought and that you want to get involved in stopping violence in your community. If you want to know more about Black Women for Positive Change or get involved with their efforts, visit their website, blackwomenforpositivechange.org. And if you'd like to hear the show again or share it with a friend, please visit our website, anotherviewradio.org, and download the podcast. You can also sign up for our eView newsletter, a once-a-week reminder of upcoming shows. And we're on Facebook, so please like us. And Lisa and I would love to hear from you with show ideas. If there's a topic you want us to discuss, drop us a line at info@anotherviewradio.org. Our theme music was composed and performed by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Victor Bowman is our audio engineer, and Denise Norris answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Have a fabulous weekend. Stay safe in the storms this afternoon. And let's get together again next Friday at noon for Another View.